Rain had just begun to fall as Elise Monroe hurried through the sliding glass doors of Bright Futures Daycare, clutching a small dinosaur-shaped lunchbox in one hand and her phone in the other. Her son, Max, tugged gently at her coat, excited chatter spilling from his lips as he talked about the macaroni art he'd made that day. Elise smiled, distracted only for a moment as her phone buzzed. She expected it to be a casual text from her husband, Aaron, maybe something about picking up takeout or running late. But what she saw instead made her blood run cold. Moving to Madrid with Lena. I've transferred our savings to my personal account. Best of luck keeping up with rent. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her hand trembled as she finished signing Max out of daycare, her signature suddenly resembling scribbles. Her world tilted while her son tugged again at her coat, utterly unaware of how their lives had just shattered. Mommy, did you bring my T-Rex gummies? Elise forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course I did, sweetheart. She managed to type back a simple, chilling reply. Thanks for the update. 3 words. Neat and numb. Her heart, however, was anything but. Lena. Aaron's project coordinator. Elise had always had a quiet suspicion about her, the way Aaron mentioned her name too often, laughed at her jokes too loudly. Still, she had never imagined this. Leaving her. Their child. Their life. With a text message and a cold-blooded financial ambush. By the time they reached their 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of downtown Denver, the shock had settled into her bones. She handed Max his snacks, placed him in front of his favorite dinosaur show, and retreated to the kitchen, where she dialed their bank. The hold music sounded almost mocking. When she finally reached a representative, the voice on the other end confirmed her worst fears, the $53,890 they had saved over 8 years, gone. Transferred that morning to an individual account under Aaron's name. Technically, the representative explained, it wasn't theft. Both names had been on the account. But he left us, Elise whispered. He left our child. There was only a pause in return, then, I'm sorry, ma'am. Legally, there's nothing we can do. She opened their checking account. $412.67. Rent was due in 5 days, $2,150. And Max's daycare fees were scheduled to auto-deduct in 2. Her hands were trembling as she set the phone down. Her legs moved on instinct, carrying her to the small living room, where Max was singing softly to himself, a gummy dinosaur between his fingers. Is Daddy making pancakes tomorrow? He asked, without looking away from the screen. Elise crouched beside him, brushing his hair back gently. Daddy had to go away for a while, honey. But we're going to be okay. A lie she hoped would become the truth. Later that night, her phone rang again. The caller ID read, Monroe residence, Aaron's parents. Hello? She answered hesitantly. Elise, what on earth is going on? His mother, Cynthia, snapped. Aaron told us you are refusing to let him see Max unless he pays you more support. What? Elise froze. Cynthia, he left. He moved to Spain. He emptied our savings. I'm just trying to figure out how to. Don't lie to me, Cynthia hissed. He showed me your messages. You're blackmailing him. I raised a better man than that. Elise's jaw tightened. She realized, with a sinking heart, that Aaron had prepared more than just a physical escape. He was building a narrative. One where he was the victim, and she, the unreasonable, manipulative wife keeping his child from him. And Cynthia had swallowed it whole. She hung up before tears could fall. That night, Elise couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like battlefield debris. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, family trips, birthday cakes, Max's first steps. All of them stained now by the knowledge that while she had been documenting memories, Aaron had been planning his escape. He hadn't just left. He'd set a fire and walked away. But he'd made a mistake. He thought she would crumble. That she would surrender. Elise stared out the window as the rain drizzled against the glass, then opened her laptop. If he thought she was going to let him vanish into another country with their life savings and their son's future. He had no idea who he'd just betrayed. By morning, the storm outside had cleared, but inside Elise Monroe's apartment, the atmosphere remained heavy. She had barely slept, her mind racing between betrayal and logistics, bills, custody, survival. The numbers didn't add up, but worse was the ache in her chest. How had she not seen it coming? But deep down, Elise knew she had. She just hadn't wanted to. After dropping Max off at daycare the next morning, Elise sat in her car outside of a bland, beige office building, the marketing agency where Aaron had worked for the last 5 years. She hadn't told him she was coming. She didn't want to believe he'd truly vanish without a word, without facing her or their son like a man. The receptionist, a young woman with sharp eyeliner and a softer voice, looked up as Elise approached the desk. "I'm here to see Aaron Monroe," Elise said, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman's expression shifted. She glanced down at her screen, then back up, sympathy creeping into her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Mr. Monroe no longer works here." Elise blinked. "What? That can't be right. He was working Monday." The woman hesitated, clearly caught between professionalism and concern. "I'm really not supposed to discuss personnel matters, but he resigned 2 weeks ago. Last Friday was his final day." Elise's body went still. 2 weeks. While she was researching preschools, grocery shopping, arranging playdates, her husband had been planning his escape. He had been acting like everything was fine, kissing her cheek, helping Max with his puzzles, eating the meals she cooked, and yet every moment was a lie. Back in the parking garage, Elise sat motionless behind the wheel. The reality was settling in like a cold fog. Aaron hadn't made a rash decision. He'd executed a plan. A secret, strategic, heartless exit. Out of desperation, she called Trevor Holt, Aaron's college buddy and best man at their wedding. Trevor answered on the third ring. "Elise." "Hey," he said cautiously, as though expecting this call. "You knew," she said quietly. "Didn't you?" A pause. "Look, I told him it was wrong." "But you knew," she repeated, her voice breaking. "He's gone. He took everything. Max and I have nothing, and you just, what? Kept the secret?" "I didn't want to be involved." He said he needed a clean break. That he couldn't be a dad like this anymore. That you'd both be better off. "Better off?" Elise's voice rose. "Better off without a husband? Without our life savings? Without a father for Max?" "I didn't know he emptied your account," Trevor added quickly. "I swear." Elise ended the call. Her fingers clenched around the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Rage boiled beneath the surface, hotter than the panic, louder than the grief. This wasn't just abandonment. It was sabotage. She drove home, half expecting another blow to be waiting, and there it was. A certified letter lay on the doorstep like a final insult. Inside, a divorce petition, filed by Aaron a week ago. Irreconcilable differences. It included a request for full custody to be granted to the mother, with no visitation or support from the father. A clean legal exit. There was a letter from Aaron's lawyer, too. "Mr. Monroe has indicated that you possess sufficient funds to support yourself and your child. He will not be providing spousal or child support at this time." Elise laughed bitterly. "Funds? The ones he stole?" She dropped onto the couch, the letter fluttering to the ground as Max played quietly in his room. Every piece of their life was coming undone: court filings, lies to his family, legal abandonment, all cloaked in a smokescreen of false civility. She opened her laptop and did what she should have done weeks ago. She looked for a lawyer. That same night, while Max slept with his arms curled around his favorite stuffed triceratops, Elise drove to a small law office tucked between a laundromat and a coffee shop. The sign on the door read, "Vivian Avery, Family Law." The woman who greeted her wore a little makeup, a tailored navy suit, and had eyes that didn't miss a thing. Vivian listened without interrupting as Elise explained, handing over the divorce papers, the bank statements, the timeline of deception. "What your husband did," Vivian said when Elise finished, "is vile. Morally? It's abandonment. Financially? It's manipulation. But unfortunately, legally, he was allowed access to that account." However, she raised a finger. Judges do not look kindly on someone who drains shared assets and flees the country without any plan for his child. Elise's throat tightened. "He made it look like I was keeping Max from him. He even told his mother I threatened him." "We'll need to prove otherwise," Vivian said. "What we need is a paper trail. Employment records, travel logs, anything that shows he planned this escape while pretending to be a present father. And if he's earning money abroad, we can petition the court for emergency child support and freeze any remaining assets." Elise nodded. She would do whatever it took. When she returned home, her determination renewed, she started searching through Aaron's old desk, hoping for a tax return or investment statement, anything that might show how much he was hiding. What she found instead was more revealing. In the bottom drawer, Beneath old receipts and gadget manuals, was a sealed envelope addressed to Aaron's mother. Inside was a card, birthday, judging by the floral print, and a handwritten note. Mom, thanks for helping us with the Madrid apartment. Lena and I can't wait to show you around when you visit in June. We couldn't have done it without your support. Love, Aaron. Elise stared at the words until they blurred. Beatrice had known. She'd helped. The woman who accused Elise of turning her son against her had bankrolled the very betrayal that nearly ruined her and her child. Hands shaking, Elise took photos of the note, the card, the envelope. Everything would go into her growing evidence file. Because this wasn't just about Aaron anymore, it was about everyone who enabled him. She opened their shared laptop and logged into Aaron's email. He always used the same password structure, Max's birthdate followed by their anniversary. 2 tries, and she was in. Her eyes widened as she clicked through the drafts folder. There, unsent but saved, was an email to Lena attaching a polished resume. The subject line, Meridian Global, Madrid office application. The job offer had a start date 2 days after his text to her. He hadn't stumbled into this new life. He'd engineered it. Elise took a deep breath and forwarded everything to Vivian. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. 3 days after uncovering Aaron's secret job offer, Elise Monroe sat across from attorney Vivian Avery in a quiet legal office, the walls lined with diplomas and dusty law volumes. The envelope containing Beatrice's note, the email drafts, and the printouts of Aaron's bank transactions lay spread across the table like weapons. Elise hadn't slept much, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She had transformed from a stunned victim to a mother on a mission. Vivian leafed through the documents, pausing at each damning line. This, she said, tapping the resume with a manicured finger, is gold. It confirms employment. And the timing, submitted before he even left the country, shows planning. He didn't abandon you in a fit of emotion. This was deliberate. Elise sat rigid in her seat. He's trying to erase us. Me, Max, everything we built together. Vivian nodded. And he's counting on the fact that you'll collapse under pressure. That you'll take a settlement just to end the nightmare. As if on cue, Elise's phone buzzed. A new email from Aaron's lawyer. She opened it and read aloud, her voice thick with contempt. An offer of $5,000 to settle all financial claims and waive any future support. To minimize the emotional toll on both parties, she added, quoting the letter with a sarcastic tone. Vivian let out a humorless laugh. They're testing your desperation. Hoping you'll cave because the rent is due. Elise stared at the message, jaw tight. I won't. Later that evening, after Max was tucked into bed, Elise sat in her living room, surrounded by documents. She opened her laptop and created a spreadsheet, court documents, email threads, screenshots of texts, bank withdrawals, all time-stamped, all cataloged. Her eyes were bleary, but her determination burned brighter than ever. That night, the phone rang again. The caller ID was hidden, but the voice that greeted her was unmistakable. Elise, said a hesitant woman. It's Bethany. Jackie's former roommate. Elise sat upright. Why are you calling? I wasn't going to get involved, but I saw your contact info on a daycare application in Jackie's drawer. I thought you should know, this thing with Aaron? It's not spontaneous. They've been planning to move to Madrid for months. Elise's heart pounded. How do you know? I overheard them. She was bragging about how Aaron was setting up accounts in places you couldn't touch. That they'd make legal proceedings so expensive and slow, you'd just give up. Elise closed her eyes, fury coursing through her. Did she say where? She mentioned something about Liechtenstein and a private advisor. I didn't catch details, but I just felt like you deserved to know what you're up against. Thank you, Elise said, stunned. After hanging up, she immediately contacted Vivian, who confirmed what Elise had suspected. If Aaron is hiding money in offshore accounts, Vivian said, we need solid proof. A bank name. An account number. Anything that lets us track and freeze those funds before they vanish. They filed emergency motions with the court, requests for child support, spousal maintenance, and immediate asset disclosure. While waiting for a hearing, Elise and Vivian drafted a legal strategy to name both Aaron and Beatrice in a civil suit if they were found to be jointly involved in hiding assets. Then came the most chilling moment yet. A message from an unknown number lit up Elise's screen. I hear you're dragging my mother into this. Bad move, Elise. Drop it or you'll regret it. Aaron. Elise's fingers curled around the phone. He was becoming reckless, his polished mask cracking. And that crack would be her way in. She saved the message, forwarded it to Vivian, and moved forward with the plan. The emergency hearing was set. The morning of the court date, Elise dressed in a simple navy suit, hair pinned back, face calm but cold. She had one goal: protect her son. Beside her, Vivian flipped through the case folder with the precision of a surgeon. As they entered the courtroom, Elise nearly stumbled. Beatrice was there. Poised, elegant, and scowling. "You should be ashamed," Beatrice hissed under her breath, approaching Elise in the hallway. "Extorting my son when you drove him away." Vivian stepped between them, her voice razor sharp. "Mrs. Monroe, you're here, which means we'll have the chance to question you under oath. So I suggest you choose your words carefully." Beatrice blanched but said nothing more. The hearing was brief but potent. Vivian presented a concise timeline: Aaron's employment offer from Madrid, the sudden transfer of funds, the lack of notice, and the documented evidence of Beatrice's involvement. When the judge reviewed the email drafts and the financial withdrawals, his expression darkened. Aaron, of course, did not appear. "Emergency motions granted," the judge said. Mr. Monroe is to provide child support immediately. All known joint accounts are to be frozen pending full disclosure. A breath of relief escaped Elise's lungs. It was a victory. But the real battle still loomed. The next morning, Elise received a call from an international number. "Is this Elise Monroe?" asked a woman with a Spanish accent. "This is Lucia Ramirez, HR Director at Meridian International. I'm calling regarding Aaron Monroe." Elise's stomach dropped. "Yes? I wanted to inform you Mr. Monroe is no longer employed here. He was terminated yesterday." "What?" Elise asked. "Why? An email was sent to our office from your account, containing documents and legal threats. Upon investigation, it became clear that Mr. Monroe failed to disclose pending custody litigation, which is against our company policy." Elise's blood went cold. "I didn't send that email." Lucia paused. "Then someone did, using your name. The documents included private legal files." Elise knew instantly. Beatrice. Only one person had access to those documents. Only one person had stood inside her apartment recently, under the pretense of helping. She had impersonated Elise. And in doing so, sabotaged her own son's employment to manipulate the case. Identity theft. Vivian's voice over the phone was clear and calm, but her words were cutting. "This changes everything. We can now name Beatrice in a separate suit for fraud and interference with a court order. She's no longer just enabling Aaron. She's conspiring. And Elise? She was done being underestimated. She was going to tear down every lie, one piece of truth at a time." Elise Monroe stood by her kitchen counter, her phone gripped tightly in one hand as the voice of attorney Vivian Avery buzzed through the speaker. "She impersonated you," Vivian said. "Used your name, your documents, and sabotaged your husband's employment to make him appear unable to pay support. All to reinforce a legal narrative that benefits him. We'll need to move fast." Elise's heart pounded. The only person who had access to those documents, the tax returns, the custody papers, even her marriage certificate, was Beatrice. During her carefully staged visit weeks earlier, Beatrice had helped organize Elise's legal paperwork. Elise had been so emotionally overwhelmed she hadn't thought twice. Now, it was crystal clear, Beatrice hadn't just funded Aaron's escape. She was actively orchestrating their defense. Vivian had already begun drafting a motion for identity fraud and court interference. They would file it within 48 hours, alongside a formal police report. But just when Elise thought she had braced herself for every blow, a new one came from the most unlikely source. Her phone rang again. The caller ID read, "Jackie." Elise answered, skeptical. "Jackie. Elise." Jackie's voice was softer than Elise expected. "Nervous. We need to talk. Unless you're ready to testify, I'm not interested." "Please," Jackie pleaded. "You need to know. Aaron's spiraling. I think he's about to do something reckless." Elise's spine stiffened. "Reckless how?" "He booked a one-way flight to Chicago. Told me he's coming back to fix everything. But he's not himself, Elise. He's unraveling, angry, erratic." Elise swallowed hard. Aaron had never been physically threatening before, but desperation was a dangerous fuel. Especially for someone whose life plan had just imploded. "What else?" Elise asked. Jackie hesitated. "He told me not to worry about the frozen accounts. That he had backups. Turns out he had another account. One he never mentioned to his mother or even me until yesterday. Elise's ears perked. Where? Liechtenstein. Over 200 grand. He set it up months ago with the help of a private advisor. He said. It was for when things get ugly. That was all Vivian needed to hear. Within hours, Jackie had agreed to provide copies of bank statements and a sworn statement in exchange for immunity from any legal fallout. In truth, Jackie had been misled too, promised a new life, only to realize she was being used as a pawn in a much darker game. The evidence she provided was the final missing puzzle piece. Vivian moved with ruthless precision. Emergency motions were filed that afternoon for freezing all known and hidden marital assets, including those in Liechtenstein. Enacting a restraining order, effective immediately upon Aaron's re-entry into the U.S. Submitting a formal complaint against Beatrice for identity theft and interference in legal proceedings. Meanwhile, Elise prepared her home. She changed the locks. Informed Max's daycare of the situation. Alerted building security. She even stayed at her parents' home in the suburbs the night before Aaron's scheduled arrival, just in case. The next morning, as planned, airport security intercepted Aaron upon arrival. When he presented his passport, the restraining order flag triggered a soft detainment and immediate service of the court summons. Elise didn't witness it, but she imagined the shock on his face with some satisfaction. That afternoon, he called. "You vindictive," he began, but Elise cut him off. "You brought this on yourself, Aaron." "I came back to work things out," he snarled. "Not to be ambushed." "With no hotel reservation and a one-way ticket?" She replied flatly. "You came to take control again. But I've already taken it back." She hung up before he could respond. In court the next day, Aaron sat with a newly hired attorney, his usual composure fraying at the edges. His suit looked wrinkled, his jaw clenched as Vivian laid out the case with methodical grace. First came the documents, transfer receipts, offshore account records, and financial withdrawals that clearly indicated a pattern of deception. Then Jackie's sworn affidavit, in which he outlined Aaron's plan to mislead the court, hide assets, and abandon parental responsibilities. Finally, Vivian unveiled the most damning document of all, Aaron's custody strategy, pulled from his cloud drive, detailing how they would use Elise's past postpartum depression against her. Aaron's face turned pale. The courtroom was silent as Vivian delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, we are not merely looking at an impulsive departure or a failed marriage. We are examining a long-term conspiracy to defraud a spouse, strip a mother of her parental rights, and manipulate the legal system using stolen identity and fabricated narratives. My client has acted with dignity, patience, and responsibility throughout. Mr. Monroe, however, has acted with cowardice, cruelty, and premeditation." The judge nodded slowly. "I've reviewed the documents, the timelines, the messages, and the witness statements," he said. "This is not just abandonment, it is calculated evasion of legal and moral obligations. I hereby order the following." The ruling was swift and sweeping. Full physical and legal custody of Max to Elise. All assets, including offshore accounts, to be frozen under court supervision. Supervised visitation for Aaron, contingent upon compliance with therapy and court conditions. Confiscation of Aaron's passport pending completion of the forensic accounting and civil trial. Referral to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into identity fraud and potential conspiracy charges against both Aaron and Beatrice. Aaron sat motionless, stunned. As Elise exited the courtroom, she didn't feel triumphant, just steady. Grounded. Like the earth had finally stopped shaking beneath her feet. Weeks passed, then months. The fallout was extensive. The forensic accounting revealed not only hidden marital assets but substantial tax evasion on Beatrice's part. The once proud matriarch found herself disgraced in her social circles and facing civil penalties. Jackie returned to Spain quietly after fulfilling her end of the agreement. She wanted nothing more to do with the Monroe mess. Aaron, now jobless and under investigation, faded from relevance. His fresh start had turned into a legal and social implosion. And Elise? She thrived. With the returned assets, she purchased a warm, sunlit condo not far from Max's daycare. She returned to full-time editorial work at a small press that valued her resilience and precision. Her parents helped as needed, and Max, sweet, wide-eyed Max, adjusted quickly. One evening, after bedtime stories in Dino-themed pajamas, Max looked up at her. "Mommy, are we gonna be okay now?" Elise tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "We already are." The next morning, Elise poured herself a coffee and sat by the window of her new home, watching the sunrise. She remembered Aaron's final text, "Good luck paying rent." She smiled, raised her mug in mock salute, and whispered, "Thanks for the motivation." 6 months after Aaron Monroe's cruel text shattered the illusion of their marriage, Elise stood barefoot on the balcony of her new home, wrapped in a knit sweater, a warm mug of coffee cradled between her hands. The morning sun was rising slowly over Denver, painting the city's skyline in hues of amber and gold. From inside the condo came the sound of Max giggling at his cartoons. The scent of cinnamon waffles lingered in the kitchen. Peace. Not the fragile, temporary kind she used to cling to between Aaron's mood swings and empty promises, but real, earned, enduring peace. So much had changed. And yet, Elise had never been more herself. The legal battle had continued for several months after that explosive courtroom hearing. Vivian, ever meticulous, had worked alongside financial investigators and international legal contacts to trace every dollar Aaron and Beatrice had tried to hide. The Liechtenstein accounts were frozen under international compliance. The funds were eventually ordered to be repatriated and included in the final divorce settlement. In court, Beatrice's attempt to frame Elise using identity theft backfired spectacularly. Her social circles, once filled with club luncheons, charitable galas, and polished smiles, turned cold. She was formally charged with identity fraud, and although she avoided jail time due to her age and lack of criminal history, she was slapped with significant fines and barred from any legal guardianship petitions involving Max. Elise watched the woman who once looked down on her as not good enough for her son face public disgrace. Aaron, meanwhile, suffered a slower, more drawn-out undoing. His industry reputation tanked. News of the court proceedings, particularly the parts involving custody manipulation, offshore accounts, and Jackie's sworn affidavit, spread through professional networks like wildfire. Recruiters stopped calling. Interviews dried up. Clients withdrew contracts. The man who once promised Elise the world now struggled to keep a roof over his own head. Yet Elise never gloated. Because she wasn't focused on destruction anymore. She was focused on rebuilding. Using the restored funds from the marital assets, Elise bought a modest but beautiful condo in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. I had 2 bedrooms, a sun-filled kitchen, and a small nook by the window where Max kept his art supplies. She made sure the second bedroom was just for him, bright green walls, dinosaur bedding, shelves of storybooks, and a reading tent with a star lamp. They were safe. They were stable. And Elise was free. She also returned to her passion, editing manuscripts. A local independent publisher had hired her as a senior editor after hearing how she managed her own case. If you can wrangle the legal system like that, the hiring manager had said, you can definitely wrangle stubborn authors. The job came with flexible hours and health benefits, something she hadn't had since becoming a stay-at-home mom. But more than the paycheck, it brought back a piece of herself she'd put on hold for years. She found joy again in her routine. In school drop-offs and bedtime stories, in reading poetry submissions and sipping tea over final edits. She joined a parenting co-op. Started a weekend book club. Hosted playdates in the park. Even considered, tentatively, the idea of dating, one day, when she was ready. And Max? He flourished. Free from the confusion of his father's emotional whiplash, he became more expressive, more confident. He formed close friendships at preschool, excelled at puzzles, and declared that he would grow up to be a dinosaur doctor, which Elise fully supported. Most nights, he asked to fall asleep to a story of Max the Brave Explorer, a bedtime saga Elise invented to help him understand courage, resilience, and kindness. One afternoon, Elise received a certified envelope, final divorce decree, with the judge's signature, closing the case. The ruling had been decisively in her favor. Full legal and physical custody of Max. All previously hidden marital assets returned, including accounts in Liechtenstein and Spain. Aaron ordered to pay child support, with a clause that recalculated payments based on future earnings to prevent intentional underemployment. Beatrice barred from contact with Max without written consent from Elise. All legal fees reimbursed to Elise through asset liquidation. She stared at the document, a strange emptiness washing over her. Not sadness, not even relief, just closure. The final page in a chapter she hadn't chosen, but had rewritten on her own terms. Later that evening, she tucked Max into bed. He hugged his stuffed stegosaurus tightly. "Mommy, He asked, "Do you think Daddy will come back someday?" Elise paused. She never wanted to lie to him. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I know that you are so loved, and you're never going to be alone." Max nodded, his small face wise beyond his years. "I like it here better. It's quiet." After he fell asleep, Elise returned to her balcony with a blanket and her journal. She opened to a fresh page, dated it, and wrote, "6 months ago, I was abandoned like I didn't matter. Now, I know exactly who I am. A woman who survived. A mother who protected. A soul that refused to be erased." She thought back to that first message, the one that had begun it all. "Moving to Spain with Lena. Transferred our savings. Good luck paying rent." What Erin had intended as a final blow had instead become the ignition of her strength. Elise now mentored women going through similar situations. She'd started an online support group, Reclaim, offering guidance, legal resources, and emotional support for women blindsided by abandonment or financial abuse. The group had grown quickly. Every week, new stories poured in, mothers left overnight, savings stolen, narratives manipulated. And every week, Elise offered the same message. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not powerless. That support group became a part of her purpose. A part of the legacy she would leave, not just for herself, but for Max. Because the greatest lesson she could pass on to him wasn't how to avoid mistakes, it was how to stand again after falling. One day, she received another message from Erin. "Do you really think you won?" She stared at the words. Then, without replying, she deleted the message. Because she didn't need to prove anything to him. She'd already won. In the soft light of the evening, Elise closed her journal, wrapped herself tighter in her blanket, and watched the sun set over her new life, one built not from illusion, but from truth, grit, and an unwavering love for the boy sleeping in the next room. She had been left behind. But she had risen far, far ahead.